Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
I took care of your disabled father for 10 years, and now that he is gone, he decided to get rid of me like a piece of junk. The woman's outrage was unparalleled. I gave up my favorite job, postponed the birth of our children, and all for your sake, so that you could continue to advance in your career, and you, scoundrel, found another. Not only that, but she has a child with you. Claire grabbed her purse and ran out of the apartment. Claire and Jordan had been married for 10 years. They met at a college party and never separated again. "I'll pick you up tomorrow." The first night they met, Jordan said boldly, "Yeah, come by." Claire readily agreed. Every morning a whistle sounded under her window, followed by a not too loud whistle. "Claire, the carriage is here." Looking up to Claire's window on the 5th floor, Jordan was already standing below, with a briefcase under his armpit. Just then, Claire's black head, with its wavy curls, appeared in the open flame and her usual, now Jordan." 3 minutes later, Claire would jump out of the doorway, and the long Jordan would take another briefcase, a girl's briefcase, under her armpit. They returned from class together, too. 6 months of meetings were enough for them to realize that they were made for each other. "Where are you going, to the library?" Claire asked her cheerful classmate. "Yeah, you." "Are you going there, too?" And the young people walked together. "Shall we go to the movies?" suggested Jordan, and I was just dreaming of a new movie. Claire was excited. Movies, books, and music, they liked the same things, or almost the same things. Even in the student cafeteria, everything was resolved to the advantage of both of them. He loved the crumb of bread, she the crusts, and by ordering the vinaigrette, Claire always knew that the peas, which she couldn't stand, would be sparingly eaten by Jordan. "Just look at these misers. It's a natural plushkin with a box. They have every trip to the canteen so profitable." Their buddies laughed, pointing their fingers at the couple. Even with the current abundance of everything in the stores, it was not difficult. Christopher, his son and daughter-in-law, did all his errands perfectly. He was content, although he was very sad after the sudden death of his wife 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack. He had grown fond of the cheerful, troublesome daughter-in-law. "Claire, you look so much like Jordan, Mama," he told her often. "Just as troublesome and never angry. And my Betty, she was just as easygoing." Claire would rush to hug a sad Christopher. Come on now. Come on, it's all right, we're here." The elderly man tried to discreetly wipe away involuntary tears, and soon got used to the lightning visits of Claire, who whirlwind carried around his small apartment, immediately put it in order. "Christopher," she shouted from his bedroom, "do you want that old shabby chair? Why don't we throw it away, and Jordan will bring you a new one tomorrow?" Christopher instantly forgot about the sadness and ran as hard as he could to save his favorite chair, as old and dilapidated as he was. Next time, as soon as her father-in-law's mood became sad, she again found something just as precious and frightened him with the expulsion of the precious object to the garbage. The father-in-law piously believed that his daughter-in-law's efforts were caused solely by her love of order and new things. He didn't realize how Claire was laughingly telling her husband in the evening, "Do you know how she scared Daddy today? He's sitting there looking at an old picture, you know. Remember your mom? Oh, him again. He was upset. You know, he loved Mom very much." "Yeah, I know." Claire stopped him. "I wanted to distract him. I frightened him with the chair that time, and today I threatened to throw away the antique clock, the one that doesn't work, and my father was so angry with me before I left. Young people nowadays don't understand anything about good things. Young people just want to spend money, and the chair will last 100 years. Oh, he can do that. He smiled at Jordan. I can imagine how many hours he grumbled when you left. Let him. Claire waved her hand lightly. At least he didn't sit around crying and crying. A little stress improves his vitality, but dinner must have calmed him down, said Jordan, leaning back in his chair and stroking his stomach. You've never cooked as good as you did tonight, Claire. Satisfied Claire smiled contentedly and immediately commanded, I didn't cook for nothing. I was counting on your help. The dishes are yours. Get to the sink now, come on. Of course, it was purely symbolic labor, washing dishes after a delicious dinner, but my wife was pleased. She was spinning around, serving, then a fork, then a spoon, then wiping everything washed clean and putting it in its place. Not work, but pure pleasure, the continuation of communication, all the more joyful that now the couple did not see each other during the day. Claire came home early from her work, so that she took care of her father-in-law more and more often. Everything flowed smoothly until one day Claire was interrupted from work by a call from Jordan. Claire. He was almost shouting into the phone. Dad's having a stroke. My neighbor Clara called me. She's already called an ambulance, but I can't leave. I have a meeting with the Chinese in 10 minutes, you know. I'll be right there. I'll be right there. Claire got right to the point. I'm on my way. I'll call you later. And she was already rushing down the corridor to warn her superiors, putting on her coat and forgetting about her boots. And so she arrived at the hospital. Only getting out of the cab, she saw that she would have to walk through the puddles in her shoes. Confused, she stood by the car, not knowing where to go. I'm sorry. The cab driver waved his hands. You can't go any further. You see the barrier? Claire looked at him uncomprehendingly and silently walked forward, looking for the main entrance with her eyes. She was in a hurry, as if something depended on her there, in the ward where Christopher was. Only at the emergency room did Claire realize that she would not be allowed into any room. Stroke patients were taken to the intensive care unit while it was still possible to prevent major complications from the stroke. There was no way anyone would be allowed in. The confused Claire, holding her coat in her hands, stood at the door to the intensive care unit for so long that the nurses and orderlies who ran by began to squint at her. Finally, one of them, touched by Claire's lost look, stopped and asked, What are you waiting for, woman? We have father here, and began to explain that she and her husband were at work, that they had been told about the intensive care unit, and that she didn't know what to do. What is the name of the patient? With a brief nod, the nurse left, and soon the doctor, a tall, stern brunette, came out of the ward. Well, who's here? She said her father-in-law's name, although there was only one Claire in the hallway. Me, how is he? Is he alive? Claire bailed. He's alive if he's here. The doctor replied in a low voice, What are you, his daughter? A daughter-in-law, but still a daughter. Claire said hurriedly, as if something depended on her words. Your father suffered an ischemic stroke, and he's still in serious condition. Leave your phone number so I can contact you at any time. Could it get any worse? Claire was scared. Anything can happen in this life. The patient is stable. He's conscious. We need your phone number so that we can call you when we move him to a regular ward. He will need constant care. He is a bedridden patient. What do I need to do? What should I prepare? Claire was worried all over again. Here's a list of things to take with you to the hospital. The doctor pointed to a poster. Excuse me, I have a lot of work to do. Goodbye. Goodbye. A bewildered Claire lowered her arms, then suddenly realized, "Oh, thank you very much, doctor. Have a good day." The doctor was already closing the door behind her, but Claire had time to see a long row of catalogs on which lay men and women. As far as Claire could make out, covered only by sheets, next to them, like cranes on long legs, were racks of IVs. "Where are you, Christopher?" She tried to look out for Claire, but the door slammed shut in a second, a click sounding. Claire was already on the phone, the worried husband. "Claire, where are you? What have you got? Did you make it?" The stream of questions seemed never-ending. Finally, Jordan stopped talking and Claire was able to answer. "Yes, Jordan, I'm at the hospital. Christopher's in intensive care. They won't let me see him. He's in stable condition. I talked to the doctor, but Dad's conscious. What about him? Are you sure it's a stroke? Is there any hope he'll recover?" I was worried on the other end of the line. "Yes, as soon as the injections work and he feels better, he'll be moved to a room. I'll be right there. Wait for me, Claire. Stay there. Just where is it?" She explained where it was and added, "Only you can't go through the grounds. I'll be waiting for you at the entrance to the hospital courtyard on the square side." In 10 minutes, she was already sitting in a warm, cozy car and once again detailed everything again. And as soon as he is transferred to a regular ward, someone must be with him all the time because there is not enough staff to take care of every stroke patient. We don't know what condition he's in yet. For the time being, in any case, there will be bed rest, feeding, washing. The nannies can't manage it all. "Claire, you realize I can't quit my job, right? I just signed a contract with the Chinese partners. I just need to be on site." Jordan was upset. Claire already realized what was about to come out of her husband's mouth. "But this is the men's room. Jordan, how will I be there?" "I don't know." Jordan was confused. "Why don't you call and find out? Do it in the morning, honey, and you'll do a better job. You've always been in touch with Daddy. You know roughly what he needs and how to treat him, don't you?" When a sudden disaster strikes, people start looking for a way out. There is always someone they know who has already experienced the same or similar in their lives. So it happened with Claire. Coming to work in the morning, she saw the sympathetic looks of her colleagues, began to ask questions. "Oh, Claire, how are you doing? How's your father-in-law? Alive, I hope. How are you? How's Christopher?" The questions came one after another. All 5 women, sitting in the same office, had become friends and were aware of each other's family affairs. It turned out that the oldest of them, Doris, had once cared for a paralyzed aunt, and Lara, who had just joined the team, also had experience with her grandmother, who had suffered a stroke, but relatively mild. The first thing to do is to ask the doctor about painkillers, Doris stated. At first, their pain is severe. It prevents them from starting exercises and workouts. Massage should be done lightly to relax the paralyzed side. "Oh, girls," Claire begged. "Thank you, but can I ask you to explain it all over again?" "Yes, of course," Doris and Lyra said almost in unison. "I haven't seen him. I don't know anything about his condition. By the time I get there, I'll have forgotten everything you told me." "Well, we're always in touch, Claire," Lara reassured her. "They'll tell you everything. Every sick person is looked after by someone, a wife or a daughter." "Yes," Claire was surprised. "I was afraid it was a men's ward." "Yes, it is now." Doris even laughed. "Men don't go in such places, my dear. You have to save your strength, and it's a woman's job to clean up the dirt and carry the pots out. What's it to them, heroes? They won't trifle. They'll run away in half an hour." Claire was a little hurt by the woman's words, but they were true. At least Jordan could also take at least a week's vacation. So what if they were Chinese? Surely they are not more important than his own father. There was some truth in Doris's words. There was no escaping it. She called the hospital in the afternoon, and they reassured her that it was still a short time, but that the patient's condition was normal after such a blow. If everything goes according to plan, then tomorrow, perhaps, will be transferred to a regular ward. Having calmed down a little, Claire finished the day's work, but just in case, she arranged for a vacation. The boss was understanding, but only asked her to warn the girls in the department. Claire, you always help your colleagues. Make sure that this time they are always ready to cover for you and keep the department on top of things. I will, Claire replied confidently. Our girls are great, they understand. She spent the whole day explaining things to Lara. It was supposed that she would substitute for those who had gone on vacation for the first time, which would be convenient for everyone, and at the same time, she would get into the flow faster and learn different types of operations. At the same time, Claire, for some reason, could not get Doris' words about men out of her head. Walking home from work, through the quiet evening streets, she decided to put an end to this moving tangle of unpleasant feelings. At dinner at home, she looked straight into Jordan's eyes and asked, "Jordan, you love your father, don't you? Why don't you at least try, yourself, to take a few days to be near him? He'd be glad. I'd love to." Jordan answered hotly, "But as I explained to you, this is the time when things are going to get busy. If we miss the moment, someone without me will screw up, and then goodbye, foreign partners." Claire seemed to calm down. "But I'm actually sure that Dad will be quite comfortable with you, and that's important in his condition." Jordan continued as if, unlike Claire, he knew his father's condition much more than she did. "Honey, you see we could hire a nurse, but she'd be a complete stranger, and I want Dad to be with just us." "We." Claire was again struck by the inappropriateness of that pronoun after the sentences her husband had just uttered. "Well, obviously, I can't be around him all the time. I have a job, but I'll stop by as often as I can to buy whatever he and you need. Please, Claire, will you do it? What's your job worth to you? It's a nerve-wracking job, and here you're busy and at home and everything. But I can't be torn between two houses. And who's going to feed you, clean the house, cook your things? Claire, really, I'm not without a hand, and my 2 years old." The woman, a little hesitated, agreed, and from the next day, began her new duties. Christopher was indeed transferred to the ward the day after tomorrow. Having arrived with a large bag of what she considered necessary, Claire saw that her father-in-law was already lying on a high special bed. His eyes were closed, the skin on his face and hands glowing with dead poverty. A fat, small nurse showed Claire the duck, toilet, and bath, explained the daily routine in a businesslike manner, and fled. The 3 women who were here, some with their husbands, some with their brothers or sons, looked at Claire with curiosity and sympathy. The neighbors helped her identify things, getting to know each other little by little. Meanwhile, Christopher opened his eyes and wheezed something. He was begging for a drink. The neighbor realized. She immediately took the drinker and showed Claire how to handle it. Lifting the old man's head, she tried as carefully as possible to give him a drink, but the water poured past him. The father-in-law groaned unhappily. "Jordan?" He whispered, almost wheezed. "He's at work, Christopher." He'll come. He couldn't yet. He's got foreigners there." Claire reassured the old man. "Don't worry, I'm with you. I'm not going anywhere." Slowly, they both adjusted to life in the hospital. It wasn't easy. Christopher, who had always been characterized by intelligence and patience, suddenly became tearful, could get cranky. "No, I won't have porridge. I can't swallow it," and he would sharply push the plate away with his healthy hand. Fortunately, he was affected by the side of the brain that does not affect speech. Intelligence didn't seem to be affected either. Only by comparing her previous interactions with the man did she realize the damage the disease had done to a man she respected. She already knew there would be outbursts of anger, groans of muscle pain, and even delirium at night. The old man, in his position, no longer had to think about shyness, since her father-in-law could not support himself, and little by little he developed the kind of trusting relationship with Claire that only a child has with its mother or nanny. All of this Claire endured. 3 weeks of treatment in the nightmarish conditions of a city hospital, with poor provision, finally came to an end. Claire said goodbye to her kind neighbors. By then, a new shift of patients and caregivers had partially entered the ward. Christopher, so cordial and polite before, barely looked at his neighbors in the ward. He was all wrapped up in the cocoon of his own illness. Claire, it was a good thing. The ward is calm, even if a little depressed, and there is a complete change in his and Christopher's life. "Jordan, I ordered a pass to the territory. You drive up, right to the entrance." In the tone of an expert dispatcher, the command was to her husband on the morning of their discharge. Jordan came to pick them up in a large, comfortable car. In his arms, he carried his father from the hospital gurney into the salon. At home in the apartment had to go up only to the 2nd floor. Now Claire was with her sick father-in-law. Just gradually Claire's life returned to normal. True, now she could not find a job in her specialty, but Jordan consoled her again. "Get some rest. You need it now. Look at the weight you've lost, Claire. Get strong. Do whatever you want. I'll make sure you don't deny yourself anything. Let's see what it's like to be a housewife." Claire smiled sadly. In her new position, she found a silver lining. She read a lot, watched movies, decorated her and Jordan's cozy apartment. It turned out that things at home never end. The more you do, the more new things arise. Even at her father-in-law's, constantly obeying the wishes of the sick, she was not so busy. Now, however, it was a very welcome, spiritualized business, the troubles and joy. Having completed a small renovation of her somewhat neglected, over the years apartment, Claire was going to take care of her own health. The young woman decided to undergo an examination in the clinic and prepare for long-postponed motherhood. She had long dreamed of having children, and now her husband would have no excuses. Claire discovered that right next to their home, a new clinic opened, quite impressive looking. The flow of patients to this clinic did not expire, which inspired her faith in the reliability and professionalism of the doctors working there. She quickly found the clinic's website on the internet and called the number and made an appointment with the doctor. The doctor, by all accounts, was a good one. The walls of her offices in the paid clinic were full of all kinds of diplomas. Having carefully examined Claire, the doctor said to her, "I rarely see healthy women, to tell you the truth. I don't see any health problems with you, so you can get dressed." Continuing to take notes, she pronounced, "Still, don't delay getting pregnant. After all, 32 years old, even by today's standards. Actually, that's what we were planning," lied Claire, expressing her dream. "The longer you think about planning, the harder it will be for you to carry a baby. The clock is ticking," smiled the gynecologist. She thanked for the recommendations and left the doctor's office. At last she felt light and calm. After a rainy, cold summer, the weather was great, which is rare in August. It was even hot, and the coolness of the evening was so welcome. The maples glistened with green paws of leaves. The birch trees spread their long strands along the whole alley. It was a shame that such a lovely day would be wasted if it wasn't used for a walk, to breathe in as much fresh air as possible, filled with the fragrance of greenery and flowers. God, it's beautiful! Claire gasped. No way I will not sit in four walls. The young woman decided to go to Krister's apartment, which had been empty for about a year. It should have been cleaned up long ago. At least some of the unnecessary junk should have been thrown out. Some of the things left behind should have been taken away. From the stop, Claire went not straight ahead, but down the long path. Still unable to escape the gloom, the old apartment from the bright sunshine and clean air. The keys to her father-in-law's apartment she carried with her, a long-standing habit. Opening the door, she took a step inside, but barely entered the hallway. She realized that the dwelling was quite habitable. At that very moment, much to her surprise, a 2-year-old boy came out of the room and stared at her with his little eyes. Just then, apparently his mother came out of the kitchen. She was an attractive woman who was clearly no more than 25 to 24 years old. "Who are you?" Claire asked in astonishment. "And what are you doing here?" "I'm Adriana. This is my son, Noah. We live here." The young woman didn't seem confused at all, but she wasn't surprised at Claire's arrival. "What right do you have to be here?" Claire was even more surprised. "This is my husband's apartment, Jordan, and who are you?" The stranger felt quite in her own right, standing firmly on her feet, and she wasn't going to answer to anyone, even if it was someone who opened the door with her own keys. Apparently, "I'm your husband's wife." She hummed stupidly and walked across the apartment without asking permission. Adriana, taking the baby in her arms, followed her everywhere. Claire found many changes in the familiar surroundings of the apartment. Christopher's bed was gone, replaced by a new, wide 4-poster bed. When Claire saw it, she wrinkled her nose. A sexodrome, and what kind of vulgar canopy over it? She was so disgusted to see the apparently shared bed of her husband and his mistress. And now what? Take up the knife, strike, as they say. The wardrobe in the bedroom was new, though inexpensive. Claire knew good things, but this was clearly an attempt to save money. Or had Adriana brought it from her possessions? It didn't matter at all. For some reason, however, Claire clung to every object, to the slightest change in the interior. She noted the beautiful mirror set in a beautiful frame and the expensive cosmetics in front of it on the dressing table. The apartment was quite clean, but there was no sense of style and coziness created by women's hands. It was a little bit of everything. There were heavy purchases, Jordan, as if the furniture was brought directly from the house of Sobakovich Nice. Good value, insignificant trifles obviously belonged to Adriana, and also there was a lot of what was left from the previous owner, Krister Hera. Grounded and ageless. A bookcase with numerous books and albums. A fundamental desk in the hall, or a real wooden closet for clothes in the bedroom. Strangely, this diversity of everything, the diversity of the surroundings, made it easier for Claire to accept her husband's apparent, accomplished, and long-standing adultery. Everything around was so unstable, unfounded, that she simply let the fact pass through her, not taking it to heart, or it was the first fever, the body's defensive reaction to stress. Both women were silent. She walked around the apartment, sat on the couch in the living room. "Is that Jordan's son?" she finally asked, looking at the baby's cute face. "Yes," Adriana answered calmly and evenly. "How long have you been here?" Claire asked. "Since Jordan, we have been here for 5 years," Adriana answered. 5 years? Claire bit her lip. So, by the time her husband cheated on her, she had already served 5 years as a sister of mercy under her father, and for the next 5 years, her husband had enjoyed spending time with this girl, was apparently happy with her. She felt either a chill or the sensation of being splashed with ice water. He always told me to wait a while, that his wife was an invalid, and that's why he couldn't leave her. His wife needed constant care, and who would he be if he left her so helpless, couldn't part with her, pitied her? Oh, pity? Claire didn't notice herself grinning ironically. Where did you meet then? At my house. Adriana answered simply. He kept promising me, saying he'd be free soon, and then we'd be together forever. How long have you lived here? For some reason, Claire asked. It's almost a year since he finally moved me and my son into his apartment, answered the interlocutor still as calmly. So I'm dead, and now there's nothing stopping you from being together. Claire sneered, unable to resist. It would appear so. I'm sorry, I didn't realize it wasn't what Jordan said. I love him and I believed what he said. Without any embarrassment, Adriana said. For some reason, she had decided that she could tell her husband's wife everything in detail, and that it was even necessary to do so. Serenely patting her son on the back, she looked peacefully at Claire with her small eyes, framed by absolutely cow's lashes, tastelessly augmented, in a medium-sized salon. And she kept talking as if to a friend, retelling the story of her acquaintance with Jordan. I, myself, am a newcomer. I didn't pass the competition at the institute, so I studied to be a hairdresser. My mother said don't go back to the district, stay here. Her sister has been living here for a long time, my aunt. She's lonely, so she got attached to me. I clean her floors, help her bathe, give her groceries, she feels good. So my aunt tells me, you, Adriana, you better finish hairdressing courses and earn money like people. Who need your institutes? That's right, I thought I'd go and learn. I grasped it on the fly, and now I'm working in a salon, men's hairdresser. Then again, Aunt Cindy made me do it. You don't know anything, Adriana. You need to get married. And where does a decent man always go? At the barber shop. Adriana looked at Claire apprehensively and bit her tongue. But Claire didn't care about her. Slowly, a bitter, soul-cutting truth began to creep in. She sits in a love nest and listens to the story of her husband's mistress. Could she have ever imagined such a thing? Yes, she couldn't have dreamed it. Simplicity is worse than stealing. Claire exhaled, looking at herself, and suddenly realized why she felt so bad. Until then, she had been sitting there without breathing, tense and tense. What? Perplexed asked Adriana, and without waiting for an answer continued. Well, in general, since the hall is male, there are many men every day, but Jordan, he is not like all of them. She looked at Claire again and finally blushed. Claire saw her neck blush, then pink patterns appeared on her chest. Her whole face turned ugly red too. Claire tried not to look at her. She hated to listen. The revelations to her young rival. Would you please call him from your number? She asked, holding back as best she could. Adriana obediently dialed the number, and after a few seconds, Jordan's familiar voice sounded in the receiver. Yes, Adriana, is something wrong? Claire took the phone from her hands and spoke. You're such a jerk, Claire. Jordan's voice sounded confused. What are you doing in there? How could you? How could you? Claire, come home. I'll explain everything to you. Jordan, of course, could not say anything else at the moment. He was simply dumbfounded. What can you explain to me? That while I was taking care of your sick father, you started a new family, lived a life of pleasure? You're a lowlife, a scumbag, a scum. Do you understand? And I don't want to see you ever." She shoved the phone into the hand of a stunned Adriana and walked out of the apartment, slamming the door. She walked away, tears streaming down her eyes. "Traitor, scoundrel, traitor." Claire mentally scolded her husband. "He has the child, and me. What about me?" Claire had always dreamed of having children from the very first days of her marriage, but she had never been able to get pregnant. Many times she would go to the doctor, but each time Jordan would talk her out of it. And then, while caring for a sick old man, thoughts of having a child of her own left Claire. There was no time for that. Still, in her heart, she hoped that she was not the one to blame for the couple's inability to give birth. Going to the doctor had made her so happy, she believed that all was not lost. But now she has and will have nothing, no family, no children, no job. No one needs her, no one at all, not even herself. If she knew why Jordan's passport had turned so brightly pink, something she hadn't and couldn't tell anyone about, perhaps Adriana's story would have dispelled her a little. Claire, by virtue of her good heart, would even feel a little sorry for this distant girl who had seen nothing good in life. Not distant, but Adriana had become wise beyond her years, and with good reason. Adriana never saw her father and never knew him. Her mother only waved away her daughter's inquiries like an annoying fly and drunkenly said, "Fuck him. Remember him." Adriana's mother was drinking. Not only that, it was absolutely indiscriminate on acquaintance, Galena. She had 3 children by different fathers, and laughing, she told one of her sons, "God knows, Ethan, from whom I gave birth to you, I lived with John, and James was next door, so he came by and mended the porch." And she laughed unabashedly. The daughter was still alone, and her mother seemed to love her more than her sons, called her Adriana, her daughter, and even occasionally bought her a new dress. Of course, when there was money from a drunken suitor, and that didn't happen very often. The Boyds would not be lost, her mother thought. The army and prison would not let them starve to death. The country needed men. On the outskirts of their village, almost in the middle of nowhere, stood only the high fences of the camp, and many kilometers farther away stood the same settlers' settlements where the released prisoners had settled down. Moors in the settlement were most cruel. The licentiousness of the former prisoners bordered on anarchy, and the hard work in the wilderness, where there is nothing to do but lumbering, left no strength for other pleasures than drinking and debauchery. As usual, 15-year-old Adriana was quickly used by one of her mother's friends, taking advantage of her simplicity and the absence of her mother. Then showed her a knife, not scaring her much. This Adriana was enough to keep quiet. And so they lived until the girl, with sinfulness, graduated from school. The mother's lover went to the girl as soon as the mother got drunk or went somewhere, even for a short time. Then Adriana was already surprised by the miracle. For 3 years she never got pregnant. Her mother's roommate was a relatively young and seemingly handsome man. Perhaps it was still trying on the girl with the position of his secret mistress. Sometimes in a good mood, he praised Adriana for dignity, incomparable with the appearance of the mother, who with every drink became a terrible, sprawled-across old woman. Knowing that her mother had a sister in a distant city, Adriana convinced her mother by crying and constant persuasion that she should go there. Her mother wrote a tearful letter to her sister, and her aunt agreed to take her niece in for the first time. The rest of Adriana's story, Claire, was almost true, except for the legend of the institute. What institute? For the uneducated daughter of an alcoholic? The school in the village gave knowledge that was only enough to live in the village. It is true that exiled intellectuals from the capital's universities used to work at this school and even trained a few medalists, but that was so long ago. And those who received these medals left the terrible land as quickly as their teachers, who had finished their term of exile. In short, Adriana had settled into the city quite well. Not bad at all, if you remember where she came from and who she was. Now she was in a pretty prestigious place, and she was going out of her way to please both the customers and the boss. "Come in, please." She stretched her lips in a welcoming way in front of Jordan, who came in for a haircut. "How shall we cut his hair?" "Well, it's up to you." Jordan smiled back. He was happy to see a new face. "You've studied, but I haven't. And you've probably studied more than I have." Adriana frowned modestly. "Engineer or professor?" Jordan laughed at the girl's unsophisticated compliment and asked, "And you are new. Where Claire?" Claire was the name of his regular hairdresser, of a very respectable weight and no less respectable age. "Yes, I've been hired to replace her on a trial basis, and they said I'd see what happens." Claire's retired. "Enough," she says. "Her legs have sprouted pillars by the chair. I'll dig in the vegetable garden and move to a country house. Except for onion shoots, I will not cut anything in my life. That's enough." Adriana laughed merrily. Jordan gave in to her fun and joined in. From the very first meeting, an extraordinary ease settled between them. Not for nothing, apparently, there is an opinion that love is chemistry. This gravitation of two, the desire to connect, and appeared in an instant, as soon as he saw Jordan Adriana. Without thinking, he wanted to see her again, to be closer to her. Then he realized that Adriana reminded him of the young Claire, the same mischievous eyes and dark curls. But that realization came much later, when he realized what a trap he had fallen into the moment he had decided to meet the young hairdresser after work. Adriana is so innocent and youthful, fresh as Jordan thought. Looking at her dark blonde curls and slender figure, she appeared to be very skillful in lovemaking. How was Jordan to know what and how the released prisoner had taught her 3 whole years in the settlement? Having arrived in the city, Adriana did not lead a monastic life either. Before entering the prestigious salon where she met Jordan, she had traveled the thorny path of an apprentice and was building up her hand, which it must be admitted she excelled at. She started out cutting and shaving men in a station barbershop, and what kind of people did not fall to her? One of the occasional customers, a smashing little guy who also came from the province and settled in the city in the auto shop, captivated her heart and became a constant lover. Chuckling, he told her, "You catch the customer by the beard, do you hear? We'll catch a daddy with you, you and the pleasure of it will get. All I will be easier, and even more money from him to make money. And we with you in the summer on his money, and to the sea. You say too." Adriana sulked. "I love you alone. Do I need some daddy? Love me. Who won't let you, you fool?" Lover laughed happily. "And don't let your daddy out of your hands if you get him." And he strong hand rolls the girl on a joint bed. Recently, the couple began to rent a common room. It's economical and convenient. So about a date with Jordan, allegedly on her living space, Adriana lied without blinking an eye. In fact, having become close in an instant, she and Jordan made love right in Claire's apartment. Moreover, in her own bed, knowing that Claire, she would hardly have been able to have such a quiet conversation with Adriana for such a long time. But a decent person usually sees in another a person like herself, and it could not even occur to Claire how far human baseness could extend. After all, she came to her house only briefly while Christopher slept. Sometimes he was under the care of a nurse who, for a small fee, would visit the sick man to give him an IV of medication for support. The treatment lasted about an hour, and longer with a massage. Claire was on the run making dinner. Jordan cleaned up abandoned things, and not once did the thought of what was going on here without her at night creep up on her. Yes, her husband called her often, at each call asking what she and her father should bring. And also when, at what hour she would be, in their shared apartment, it didn't bother her at all. She didn't even pay attention to her husband's unusual meticulousness. On the contrary, it was pleasant his attention, waiting, counting the hours, let's go to my place. I want to treat you to a great coffee. Hiding his eyes, proposed Jordan, Adriana, for the first time, about a week after we met. It was already late evening, and they left the cozy cafe where they had spent several evenings. Kissing and cuddling in the car interior, a grown man and a blossoming woman, did not satisfy. Both wanted to continue. And your wife? Adriana was a little surprised. The rest didn't bother her. That was the way she was. Wife, didn't I tell you? Jordan was a little confused, although he had warned Adriana about being married right away. He would be honest with this nice girl. Adriana immediately made it clear that it was impossible to meet at her place, because she lived at her aunt's place, although perfectly continued to share a room together with her former lover. She intuitively felt what and when to say, when to smile, and when to open up to meet a man. Having acquired an urban appearance, the girl also learned the ability to behave discreetly. She could not be taught to deceive. She did it brilliantly. But to keep silent where necessary, to create an image of a well-bred, well-mannered maiden, this skill had to be learned as best as possible and preferably faster. Adriana was learning. She watched the men. They showed their feelings even more vividly than women. They turned out to be excellent teachers. Say the wrong thing, and the handsome guy would snap like the last skier. A chiseled guy could get a square swear if he got the wrong haircut. Compliment, affectionate smile, worked wonders. Knave men bought them like children. Barbershop became for Adriana a kind of institute of noble maidens. She could portray any gait, any smile, from a simple and naughty girl to a price-conscious beauty, expanded her art of reincarnation. Of course, these charms applied only to men, and any woman could immediately recognize Adriana in 5 minutes. But men were coming, and for 5-minute seduction, fuse, and talent, Adriana had enough. Fascinated by Adriana's youth and the novelty of his own position, free, in love, Jordan, as if plowing in weightlessness, but had to decide what to do next. And so he decided. My wife is an invalid, he said, and after a satisfied look at the girl's surprised face, he continued, I periodically put her in the hospital to heal, but pity her, she is also a person. I could not praise myself. What a good boy. Now he wouldn't have to explain to Adriana why there were women's things in his apartment. At the same time, he made a deposit for future meetings with her. The base is a word. Adriana, not suspecting that decent-looking men, too, can lie, easily accepted his proposal and surprised Jordan, liberation and temperament, their first night together. The next day, the ardent lover could think of nothing else but another night, and Adriana again behaved with complete freedom, and he was easy and simple with her. And Claire, what of Claire? She hadn't bothered him in a long time. Talking only about diapers and medications and a new Bedsores mattress, anyone's feelings would fade, and he's a living man. He's a man, after all, a successful one, by the way. There was not a single decent acquaintance of his who did not have a permanent mistress, and now it was his turn too. He could afford an expensive beauty. but he liked this cute hairdresser, although it would be better without this job in the service industry, of course. Somehow it is not prestigious. After a couple months of lovemaking, he decided that he didn't have to show Adriana to anyone, but if anything, he wouldn't be ashamed to pass with her. Acquaintances will only smack, looking at the lush forms of his girlfriend. But to confess that your mistress works in a beauty salon, haircuts, and shaves other men, it is somehow not comical. "Adriana, you should quit that job," he said, resting after the raucous entertainment. Adriana lifted her dark head from his shoulder and looked into his eyes. "When are we to be married?" Jordan, strangely enough, was not ready for marriage with a live wife, so he took the conversation aside. "Adriana, soon I'll rent you an apartment, so we'll be there, we'll see each other more easily and freely. And my wife, she's not a bad person, she suffers. Poor thing. I try to create all conditions for her, of course, but the disease it progresses. I'd be an asshole if I left her now. You'd be the first to judge me, darling." And he rushed to kiss Adriana, showering her with compliments, and Adriana laughed again, forgetting her purpose. Adriana could wait a long time, but here she was not forced to do anything. After seeing Jordan off, she pulled the curtain on the window, a sign to her roommate that the entrance to her apartment was available. He had moved out immediately from the old small apartment to this one, rented for Adriana by Jordan, and the presence of men's things. Adriana easily explained to Jordan that her brother, a student, often visited her on weekends. She couldn't deny him a vacation and a full meal at her sister's house, could she? Jordan's free weekends suited him just fine, and he easily took on his brother's version of the story. His father and Claire were eagerly awaiting him on Saturday and Sunday too. While Jordan was with his father, Claire would get at least a few hours of freedom to clean up, socialize with her friends, at least go to the sauna after all. It turned out that everything worked out marvelously well for everyone. Everything settled down. Adriana finally quit her job. Jordan gave her enough money to support her young lover, but he still decided to keep his job. 2 years into her relationship with Jordan, Adriana suddenly found herself pregnant. She thought that her body was now rested after the stress. She didn't have to live in constant tension, so she was able to conceive. Wow, a kinder was made. Her roommate laughed, neither surprised nor pleased. "But you, Adriana, don't count on me. I'm a shitty father. I have such a kinder, probably all over the country is full of running. So come on, make your daddy happy. He needs an hair. I was just on my way to a construction site. A friend of mine wants me to go." The man, very far from thinking about the family nest, quickly packed his things and drove off in an unknown direction. Most likely not that far away, just to avoid Adriana's eyes. The confused Adriana cried for a long time, abandoned by her constant lover, with whom she had long since gotten over. Jordan arrived, saw her swollen face, and rushed to embrace her. "Adriana, what are you doing? Who's hurt you?" "No one." Adriana sobbed. "I'm pregnant." "Oh, what a trouble you're in." Jordan laughed. "It's wonderful. You'll give birth to a beauty like you." Until now, Jordan had never suspected that the news that he would soon become a father would make him happy. For so many years, he had avoided persistent conversations with Claire about the future birth of a child. Why he had avoided parenthood, Jordan himself could not answer. Not ready, that would be the truth. And here he himself did not understand why, out of a desire to appease his mistress, the acceptance of this unknown infant was suddenly born. With every visit to Adriana, this acceptance grew stronger, and now he himself did not understand why he so desperately refused future fatherhood, living with Claire. Incidentally, it must be said that he continued to have a wonderful relationship with Claire. He showed touch and care for his wife, but there had been no intimacy between them for a long time. Claire, a proud and self-sufficient woman, did not touch the subject out of delicacy. There was no need for tenderness. Christopher was dying. He was already 40 days old. Claire had long lived at home, and the couple continued to live as brother and sister. Returning from the gynecologist, Claire was just about to gather the mental strength to decide to have the most important conversation with her husband for the future of their family. It began to rain, but she, as if without noticing it, took among some half-abandoned cottages, not thinking at all about where she was going. The phone in her bag rang insistently, but she paid no attention to it. Only feeling deadly tired, the woman looked around, saw an old bench under a tree, sat down, leaned her head against the rough table, and closed her eyes. At that time, a white-haired little boy was running along the sidewalk, slapping on the puddles, enjoying the splashes that flew from under his bare feet. He tried to run exactly in the middle of the small puddles that had managed to form from the rain, and now they glistened under the light of the lantern. He squealed and laughed joyfully when the splashing water hit his face and carelessly licked the muddy drops off his lips. It was Adam, a 3-year-old little boy who had run away from his loving grandmother, and his great joy from an independent walk. There was no limit. "Adam, I'm in trouble with you," shouted the old lady, trying to catch up with her grandson and not keeping up with him. "Where are you going on the puddles? Stop. I say, you'll catch cold and you'll have to take care of yourself. Oh, you are my bitter little sorrow." Finally, she managed to pick up the baby, but she immediately let him go, shrieking from the pain that shot through her lower back. She turned to look around for a bench and only then saw a woman sitting on a bench under a tree. The old woman shuddered fearfully. "Lord, your power. What is it?" The little boy in his grandmother's arms also quieted down when he saw the stranger, and with some fear looked at the pale face of the sitting woman. "Is she alive?" The old woman muttered, slowly approaching the bench. Then she stepped toward Claire and touched her with her hand. "Whose are you going to be, girl? Why are you sitting out here in the rain? What's the matter with you?" Claire opened her eyes. "Don't worry, I'll be right out. I just got lost here by accident. Where would you go in this darkness?" The old woman looked around worriedly. "Well, let's go to my place. It's my house over there." Lifting Claire by the elbow, she continued to speak softly. "I live with my grandson. Is my name Margaret? And this is Adam." The frightened boy looked out from behind Margaret's back. Claire followed the friendly old woman. She had no strength, and she would certainly not have made it home on her own. The place was remote. The phone was dead. There were no cars or cabs around. It was a completely unfamiliar suburb where she had never been in her life. Soon enough they came to an old 2-story house, probably from the time of the first builders. They went up to the 2nd floor and entered a small apartment. Margaret put the kettle on and took her grandson into the bathroom. "I'll only be 5 minutes, darling," she said to Claire. "Otherwise, God forbid he gets sick, I'll warm the child." She quickly bathed Adam in a hot bath and brought him to the kitchen. "Now for some hot tea." After Adam, she also went to the bath and cleaned herself up. The hot shower made her feel better, and she was able to answer Margaret's questions. "I, Margaret, learned a terrible thing today," she began quietly. "I have no husband, no child, no family." "Oh, no," the new acquaintance groaned. "Are they dead?" "No, my husband is alive, even happy. He abandoned me, Margaret, and abandoned me a long time ago, and I was a fool. I lived quietly and trusted the scoundrel." Wanting to talk, the woman told about herself, not hiding any details from the old woman. "Why did he do that?" "I did everything for him, loved, cared, and what happened? I took care of his father for 10 years, and during that time he betrayed me, cheated on me." How can you do that? And the most frustrating thing is that I'm 32 years old and I don't have children. I do not even imagine whether I can even think about men. I dream about a child. 10 years I lived next to my dying father-in-law, and I thought only about a baby. While I look for a new husband, my time will be up. Claire grinned bitterly and sipped the cooled tea. Renewing the brew, the women began the tea party anew. The hostess remembered the forgotten cutlets and warmed them for her new friend. "You probably haven't eaten anything since this morning. Here, eat this, you'll feel better." Everything seems bad to a hungry person, but on a full stomach it's no trouble at all. Claire only now remembered that in the morning before going to the doctor, she had not eaten anything, thinking that she would have to take tests. Poppy seed in her mouth since last night. She feels completely drained. At first through force, living through a juicy morsel, she gradually got into the flavor. The meat was fragrant with garlic and onions, and with hot tea, Claire ate 3 cutlets and turned a little pink. Margaret began to comfort Claire, and Adam and I, too, were left alone. There are not only men who are unfaithful, there are also enough butterflies among women that fly from flower to flower. They're all looking for the best and the sweetest. Did Adam's mom leave him? Claire guessed. She's beautiful. Why would she bother with a child? She'd rather spread her beauty around the world, live for herself. And that's how deceptive appearances can be, Claire. Was she really beautiful? She took an interest in this family. The son came. "Mom, I'm getting married. Here's the bride." Well, I look at her. She looks like a daughter-in-law, a nice girl, lovely to look at. She's tall, straight, looks into the eyes, looks cheerful, and has curls. Now this miracle is made with her own hands, so she knows how to do something also good. I guess you can't drink water off a face, of course, but my Harry is worth every beauty. It's not good for a mother to praise her child, but my son, he looks like a hero from a picture. He took after my father, and our father was a man to all men. It's all right that he's found a match. God willing, they'll get along happily. Get married. I say the young years are passing. Why grow old alone? Let's have a family. Together you'll look for what you want and build it. I blessed my son. We summoned the guests, celebrated honorably, everything as it should be. Right after the wedding, my daughter-in-law got pregnant and gave birth to Adam. And now, not like before, the little one needs diapers and food, not like nowadays. He doesn't suck a tit, and his food is very expensive, they say, so he started to run out of money. Margaret told how the money shortage started, how she tried to save money and diversify at least the food of the young. She got Piglet, worked from morning till evening on a small vegetable garden, made rolls so that the harvest would not go to waste. But of course it was not enough. And the young wife sat at home more, not helping with the household in any way. She always had an excuse. She had a stomachache. Adam did not let her sleep at night. Adam was capricious. Margaret put up with it too, as long as the child was looked after. But Harry would not spoil her mood because her son tries, works, takes overtime when he can. So we stretched as hard as we could, but we got tired. That's what I'm telling you, Claire. Harry came home from work one day and said he was leaving the workshops. Turns out a friend of his from the army had written him a letter. He didn't write often, but this was just in time. He's been on a business trip for a long time, and he calls Harry to him. He writes to us that we need such people very much. You're not a drinker, handy and ahead, all sorts of tasks, like nuts. He wants Harry to work with him because his partner moved to the south and gave up business trips. He needs to be treated in the sea air, so my Harry has decided he's going to work on a rotational basis. What about your sister-in-law? Did she agree? Claire asked. How could she not? She loved money that she will buy on joy. Everything. She liked to dress up a lot, but my grandson was dressed up like a Tsarevich. I kept scolding them. Don't spoil the boy like that. He doesn't understand anything yet, and they put new expensive clothes on him every day. They wash them, so he doesn't have time to put them on a second time, as everything is already too small. He grows by leaps and bounds, but life has gotten better, hasn't it? Claire either asked or confirmed. Oh, Claire, on the outside, everything is peaceful. Money seems to have improved, but what's inside a man, you can't see at once. The wife turned out to be a troublemaker. She strayed when Adam was not even a year old. I didn't say a word when I noticed the affair. Harry came to visit. We had a goodbye, he went away, but she's so fussy about it. She's been trying all sorts of ways to get out of the house to deceive me. And she attacked the wrong one. I waited for her until she came back late, smelling of wine. Her cheeks flushed, her eyes wandering. Come on, sister-in-law, I told her, sit down next to me and let's talk. Where have you been? Who were you out with? Don't lie to me. I've seen your sister. I'm a woman myself. I know at a glance who breeds what. Well, Claire got excited. So she sat down, her eyes down to the floor, playing the innocent, but she kept silent, and I kept silent. We were sitting like that, and suddenly she started crying. Excuse me, she's crying, Mommy. She called me Mom. She lost her mother long ago. And you? Interest, Claire in the lives of complete strangers, was growing. What about me? My business is old, I told her so. It's not me I'm telling you to live with, sweetheart. You have a husband. And if you think about it, you have a son too. Will you sit like that in front of them? How will you look into their eyes? She cried, and they went to bed. And I didn't sleep all night. I had no peace. And in the morning I fell asleep, so soundly that I didn't hear anything. Only when Adam woke up and began to grunt, I jumped up to him. I looked, and my sister-in-law's bed was empty, and the bed was tidied up neatly as before the guests. I looked in the closet, and there was not a single dress. All I immediately realized, she ran away with her boyfriend, unknown to what distant lands, and she did not take any money. Unless she had a separate amount with her, but I know nothing about that, but I do not have time to sit and cry. So I dressed up my grandson and fed him, took him for a walk and sang songs. That's all. Did you even write or call afterwards? Her only listener was worried. No, Claire, I waited. I think she is a mother, such a wonderful boy, how not to love and miss him. But no, not once, not a single word. So she hasn't been around since. She has, of course she has. You can't go far without money, and that man doesn't need her without money. My sister-in-law came back 2 weeks later. Harry hadn't even gotten back from his business trip yet. Adam and I are walking from the store with a heavy grocery bag in one hand and my grandson in the other, and near the entrance, Mother of God. My daughter-in-law is sitting there. Adam shouted, Mom, Mom, but she and cry and hug my son. She almost falls on her knees in front of me again. There are a lot of unkind eyes around. Everyone is curious about what's going on in the neighborhood. But I picked up the bride and took her home, What to be ashamed in front of people? And she, poor thing, continues to wail about her misfortune. What shall I do, Mother? She says. How can I go on? She won't forgive me, Harry, and neither will you. And Adam, he cuddled up to his mother, hugging her, saying his own things to her. And I felt sorry for the poor head. He grew up without a mother. Who would teach him life? A mother to a child, whatever she is. Don't make another orphan out of Adam. Let them raise their own child, if they've given birth. How could she? Claire was indignant. To abandon such a lovely boy. And that's my sweetheart. She must have been a breed. She'd live like a human being, and then she'd do something nasty. So we agreed that we wouldn't say anything to Harry, and we'd start our lives all over again, as if she'd never done anything wrong. It's not uncommon for young people to have disagreements and quarrels between husband and wife. But as they embrace and sleep in the same bed for a night, all the past will be forgotten and there will be peace and tranquility in the house again. Didn't it work out that way for them? Claire asked. I don't know. Harry was making good money. I tried to help everyone. Kelly, that's my daughter-in-law, tried not to spend too much money, so they decided to separate. At least a little, but to have their own place. They moved from me to a one-room apartment, and to pay for it took, as it is called now, a big loan for housing exactly. A mortgage? That's what Claire said. That's the one. Margaret rejoiced, a forgotten word. They live on their own. And what about me? My eyes can't see, my ears can't hear what's going on between them. Whether we lovebirds live amicably, but only in peace, I have not known since then. I wondered if Kelly would bear it, if she'd keep her temper, or if she'd go back to her old ways. She didn't hold back, so she went out again. Claire said yes to Paula. She has. Maybe she inherited it from her parents, but she had a nature that couldn't be overcome. Was my son worth it, to change him for swindlers? He doesn't drink. He can't stand it. Well, he smokes. It's a hard job. He's used to it. He's never tried tobacco before. He's not a bad character. He doesn't pick on little things. He does everything for the house, everything with a smile. Kelly sleeps in the morning and won't go to the baby. I boil sometimes. It's not a good thing for a grown woman to lie in bed until noon, until the sun starts to blaze up her ass, but Harry just smiles. Let her sleep, Mama. She never slept so sweet as she did at your place. How did she do it in her apartment? Claire wondered. I suppose she did. I've only been there a couple of times, and then I've come with my own hotels. She said, Oh, Mama, how delicious. What pies you bake. She praises them, but she puts store-bought sausage and cheese on the table. I found out later that she started treating Harry badly, too. She'd disappear for a night or two, and he wouldn't say a word, wouldn't bother me. That's when I wished I'd warned him. Watch your wife. She's not averse to running off to the left. And then Kelly, our dear Kelly, she started drinking. One day she went to the store and did not return, but now she left with money, all that was at home, earned by her husband, took with her. She will come back, come to her senses and come back. How can she leave her son? Margaret comforted Claire. No, honey, she's not coming back. She's dead. She had an accident. Claire, who had not expected such an outcome, covered her mouth with her hand in fright. Margaret continued her sad story. She was traveling with a man, and they died together, whether it was her half-lover or another unknown. I don't know the details. Harry told me all about it. She sold their apartment together, too, as it turned out. How could she do that? It's a complicated process. Everyone who lives in the apartment has to participate in it. Claire was once again surprised. And they also have a minor child. His share is not allowed to be sold in any case. The guardianship authorities monitor it because he is defenseless, Adam, and should not remain without registration and without housing. Claire was aware of a lot of the legal laws by nature of her job, so she sold it to some crooks. There's all these black whatchamacallits nowadays. Black realtors? That's what Claire said. Yeah, that's what her half-lover set her up with and got Kelly to do the paperwork. They got a law against the law. They'll get around anything. They say they even kill people for housing if they get a lonely person who nobody asks if they're alive. And then what? Claire was already looking forward to the denouement. Then she ran away, collected all the coins and ran. The money's been squandered. So Harry came to me with Adam, asked me to look after him. He said I had a contract to finish my work. I let him go. I'm looking after my grandson myself, but it's getting harder and harder every day. While the women were talking in the kitchen, Adam fell asleep. Claire helped her carry the boy to his crib, and then she and Margaret cleared the table. She washed the dishes, and as she fell asleep, she was surprised to think that she hadn't thought of her husband at all for hours. In the morning after breakfast, she thanked the old woman for everything. Margaret, you saved me. I had no one to turn to talk to, and here you are. God brought me to you. Come on, my dear, the old woman said. If it wasn't for me, who else would have found someone else? A man in the world will not be lost. You just don't sit alone. Close yourself. Come out of your resentment. She kissed Adam on his fair head and hugged his grandmother and went home. Promised to come back soon. She really did want to get back to those two as soon as possible, to help as much as she could with them. She didn't want to go home, but there was nowhere to go. She had to solve an unexpected and despicable situation, which was created by the husband she loved before. The husband turned out not to be full of peers at all, as it would have been good if he had spared the woman from finding out about the relationship. Remembering that the best defense is offense, Jordan from the first minute took the form of insulted virtue. He met his wife with indignant words. "Where have you been, Claire?" Saying God knows what to me on the phone, throwing me off my rhythm. "You're sleeping at God knows whose house." Oh, Claire grinned, no longer surprised by Jordan's insolence. "You're out of rhythm, aren't you? And I thought you had already learned to sit on two chairs, to maneuver between two families? Well, I haven't succeeded yet." She saw that Jordan had lost a little of the high ground from which he had intended to speak to her. He shrank back and lowered his head. "Claire," he spoke in a different way, "you have to understand, there's a child in there." I didn't think anything of it. I wasn't going to have an affair on the side, but I couldn't take it. Claire looked at him straight on. "You couldn't stand the lonely idleness while I was courting your father, could you? You wanted a young body, a free relationship. Well, good for you. You're doing great. It's not like that. You're overplaying your hand. I resented you. I'm a man. I need to feel supported and cared for. And I'm a woman, so I don't need anything at all, do I?" Claire was beginning to boil. "You haven't spent a single night with my father. Not once have you offered to help me with the nurse. And I'm a young woman, too. Men still look at me, by the way, even though I've dried up and aged over the years." Jordan had nothing to say, and she was getting more and more atomized. "Do you realize what it means to spend years after a sick old man? How many times I got up to my father every night. How hard it was for me to lift him, to wash him. How I withered without society, without girlfriends. I have none left." Claire cried. They both could not remember how they had been as young people, loving each other and full of life plans. Jordan felt a grudging estrangement from his wife, forgetting everything she had sacrificed so that he could pursue his career in peace. Claire was thrown into shock by Jordan's betrayal. She simply couldn't imagine how he could have gotten to such a point of hypocrisy, though she could now recall many episodes she hadn't paid attention to. Some suspicious or inappropriate words of his, letting them pass her ears. "You're selfish." Blamed her own self after all, Jordan. "You've always been preoccupied only with yourself, with your own needs. Your long lists, your demands, the grocery lists I fed your father, demanding a nurse or a doctor to visit Christopher at home." Claire was no longer able to be indignant. She looked at her husband's flushed, aroused face and couldn't understand how her beloved Jordan could hide in the body, this fat, lustful male, thinking only of himself. What had to happen for a man to change so much? After all, Jordan's mother and father were deeply decent people. A lot of things made sense now. They had lived apart for a long time. Except for Christopher, they had nothing left to bind them together. You wouldn't think of a shared living space as a bond, but as the fruit of a marriage. Yes, and this apartment, for 10 years, became not cozy, abandoned, although they tried to bring it to a more decent form. With the salary that Jordan received, they could have long ago bought a more spacious home to equip it according to the latest fashion, hire a designer and excellent craftsman, but she had no strength, and he had no desire to somehow strengthen the household, and thus the family. And now she is alone at a broken trough. This does not scare her at all. The protective power of the body does not give Claire despair and think about the future. She needs to urgently cut this knot of feelings that has been tormenting her for more than 24 hours, because it is unbearable. Enough. Powerfully, she interrupted Jordan, who was already carrying something completely obscene, purposely atomizing himself. She only heard the words about her infertility, but she didn't care anymore. "Pack your things and leave. You have your own apartment now. You have a wife and a son. Go. I can't promise to die, but you'll finally be Adriana forever. I'll file for divorce tomorrow. I will," answered the confused Jordan. He did not expect such a quick resolution of the case. Taking the big bag, he slammed the door. Claire only grinned again, noting, "Prepared, packed the bag in advance." 2 months passed, and Claire became a frequent visitor to Margaret and Adam. She did all the housework, looked after the boy and his grandmother, and became very attached to them. She didn't want to stay in her own apartment. First of all, she had gotten used to it over the years. Secondly, she felt stuffy there. Memories came into her head, plunging her again and again into a maelstrom of bad moods and depression. She would only leave for her place in the evening, but in the morning she would deal with the divorce proceedings, grab a bite to eat somewhere on the beach, and wander around the city until she was exhausted. The weather, for Claire, was now good for anything. She treasured every hour of freedom and the opportunity to enjoy nature and the cityscape. One evening, when Claire was about to go to bed, the phone rang. It was Margaret. The old woman's voice sounded muffled and painful. "Claire, I'm not feeling well. I've called an ambulance. Come to Adam, for God's sake. He'll be alone if they take me away." Claire called a cab and rushed to the boy, taking some of the groceries she had at home. Half an hour later, she was already there. She saw an ambulance at a familiar entrance. Worried, she ran up to the second floor. The doctor had just examined the patient and was washing his hands. "Doctor, what's wrong with her?" Claire asked. "You see, it needs a full examination." The doctor answered evasively. "Her condition is moderately serious. She needs rest. We will take her to the hospital, and the main treatment will be prescribed after the final diagnosis. From that day on, Claire's worries increased. Now she visited the old woman in the hospital, brought her home-cooked food, and comforted her, promising that everything would be all right. Adam never let go of Claire's hand, and Margaret thanked God that she had someone to leave her beloved grandson to. One evening, Claire was putting Adam to bed. She read him a book, laid him on his side, covered him with a blanket, and began to hum a little song. Suddenly he looked over her head and jumped out of bed screaming, "Daddy, Daddy!" Claire turned and stood in the doorway with a surprised face. A tall, handsome man froze and looked at her without understanding anything. Then he picked up his son in his arms, kissed him, and asked, "Adam, who is this?" The boy took his father's face in his palms, looked into his eyes, and with complete seriousness whispered, "This is my mother, only it's a secret." The little boy didn't want to let go of his father. "Adam, but Daddy drove a long time, then flew on an airplane. He is very tired and hungry." Claire explained, "All right, feed him." Reluctantly, he let go of his father's hand. "Dad, will you come to sleep at my place?" "Of course, son," the father promised fervently. As always, that's why he was coming. Claire put the boy to bed again and closed the door and went into the kitchen. Quickly warming up the food, she set the table and sat down across from Harry. "I'll feed you for real in the morning, but for now there's nothing else to eat. I'm sure it's a nice dinner after a working canteen." Harry smiled and began to chow down on the soup. Over tea, Claire couldn't help herself. "I know a lot about you, Harry. Your mother told me." The man looked seriously into her eyes. "Well, that's good. I hope to get to know you better, too." 2 years had passed since Harry had discovered Claire in his house. They were married and quite happy. A few months ago, they had moved into the house Harry had bought, a large, spacious house with plenty of room for everyone. Margaret couldn't get enough of her daughter-in-law and kept telling her son that she had found him such a good wife. Adam had long ago called Claire Mama, and she was genuinely happy about it. Gifting the boy with unspent maternal love, she was picking out an ice cream cone near the summer kiosk when a man's voice called out to her. Turning around, she saw Jordan. She recognized her ex-husband immediately, but was struck by the change in his appearance. Jordan had grown old and flabby. His stomach hung over the strap of his pants, and he looked untidy and unkempt. "Hello, Claire." Jordan came very close to her and wanted to reach out his hand or hug her, but when he ran into his ex-wife's gaze, he got embarrassed and lowered his hands. "Hello." Claire answered not so much coldly as indifferently. She was deeply indifferent to this strange man, and the meeting did not please her at all. "How are you?" Jordan asked, looking the woman over from head to toe. It was the same old Claire, young, slender, and beautiful. Only better then? Probably over the years, she had gained self-confidence, the kind of confidence that only loving and beloved women have. Jordan did not know how to analyze, but he felt this confidence at once, and with a cold heart, he reached out to his ex-wife. "Good, and you, I see, not too much?" Claire inquired, unable to hide her dislike. "Yes, I'm divorced." Jordan waved his hands in different directions, as if confessing his helplessness. Though Claire didn't ask him any questions, he began to tell her in a hurry. "Adriana, she lied to me. It turned out she didn't have a child with me. I spent 5 years raising someone else's boy. Do you understand, Claire?" He looked at Claire again, as if complaining of injustice and asking for protection. "Well, what can we do? It's not the child's fault," Claire said. And then she made up with her ex and went to him. Just left a note on the table. Some people don't leave notes. Claire grinned bitterly, remembering her past experiences. However, now everything was almost forgotten, and she didn't want to remember. Not to have anything to do with her ex-husband, not even to stand next to him. It was unpleasant for her. She looked away impatiently, waiting for Jordan to make way for her. "Claire, I'm so sorry to you. You know, I miss you so much. Why don't we try to start over? You love me, and I love you. You're too late. Jordan, with your love, I don't need it now." Claire turned away to make herself comfortable, to grab the ice cream bag and walk away, but he grabbed her arm. "Claire, I'm alone, all alone. I won't make the same mistake I made last time, and you're alone too, so why don't we get together? You're childless. Who needs you but me?" "No, I'm not childless." Claire grinned contemptuously. "But that's none of your business." With her head held high, she strode past Jordan while he continued to stare after her. The man saw a tall, handsome man approach the woman. He held the hand of a blonde-haired boy, about 5 years old, and on his neck sat a little girl with dark curls on her head, diligently eating cotton candy. The happy family went on their way. Jordan stood and looked after them for a long time, thinking that he himself had given his happiness to this stranger.